The Bohinj Glacier. In the very cold period of the Ice Age 20,000 years ago, the glaciers last extended from both poles of the Earth far into the interior of the continents and covered all the major mountains. The ice that collected in the Julian Alps slid towards the foothills along the valleys of the rivers Soča and Sava. The ice flowed from the eastern rock walls of Mount Triglav into Bohinj and continued towards Bled. At the peak of glaciation, the Bohinj Glacier was up to 800 meters thick and had even spilled over the high valley edges. The ice polished the underlying surface as it flowed, forming the characteristic U-shaped glacial valley. At the climax of the last Pleistocene cold period, the Bohinj Glacier covered the entire region of Bled, including all the lesser heights. It extended almost all the way to Lesce and Radovljica and pushed the course of the river Sava somewhat to the east. The tundra and taiga in the vicinity of the glacier were the habitats of bison, mammoths, elk, deer, wolves, and alpine marmots. However, the last Pleistocene cold period was not the coldest. In its greatest extent, the Bohinj Glacier also covered a considerable part of the upper Carnolian plains. During one of the earlier glaciation periods, the glacier had extended to the east of Radovljica and left behind a characteristic terminal moraine, now known as Gorica, or the Rounded Heights. Let us return to the last cold period. At that point, the glacier extended from Lesce to Zasip, where the crests of two terminal moraines are quite visible, now the site of the churches at Zasip and Sebenje. The edge of the glacier continued further across Dolgo Brdo to Zgornje Gorje. There it almost merged with the glacier that transported ice along the Radovna Valley. The glacier left behind a natural amphitheatre bordered by a narrow crest. The ice blocked the approach to Vindgar, forming a small glacial lake. When the ice began to melt, the stream of Rečica carved a channel through the deposits, uncovering the succession of layered sediments that were deposited during the period of damming. The Ice Age was very turbulent in climatic terms. In cold periods, the glaciers became longer, and in warm periods they shortened or melted. When advancing, a glacier pushes and accumulates gravel from its base, which piles up in front of it in the form of ridges called terminal or end moraines. Traces of the first two standstills of the late Pleistocene Bohinj Glacier have been preserved in two ridges of terminal moraines at Dobravica. The plain in front of the glacier was waterlogged, and swamps eventually formed here, partially preserved at Blata and Jezerca. While withdrawing from the Bled region, the glacier came to a standstill at least 3 more times, as is shown by the ridges of terminal moraines near Petovca and above the northeastern shore of the lake. The age of their creation is not known precisely, but they are between 14,000 and 20,000 years old. Lake Bled was formed at the front of the retreating glacier. The original level was some 20 meters higher than at present, and water flowed out under Straja and through the valley now called Dindol. Only when the glacier retreated into the valley of the river Sava Bohinjka was the present outflow formed at Jezernica near Mlino. The lake in its present form is most probably somewhat less than 14,000 years old. The climate continued to warm up and became increasingly similar to that of the present day. The ice quickly melted and first retreated to the high mountains and then disappeared completely. When this glacial support was removed, avalanches and rockfalls tumbled down the slopes. Glaciafluvial or glacial river terraces are also related to the climate changes, as they were both deposited and incised by rivers along the former glacial valleys. In cold climatic periods, the rivers deposited large quantities of gravel, while during warm periods they eroded this away. Terraces formed in this manner are visible between Sobec and Lesce. They were formed by the river Sava, which encircles the Bled region with a deeply incised bed. The area of the river valley with wetlands near Berje is very attractive. The first traces of human habitation in the Bled region are also connected to the retreat of the ice. Stone tools from the late Paleolithic have been discovered in the cave of Poglejska Cerkev, in the steep walls above the newly greened amphitheatre left behind by the Bohinj Glacier.